All right, let's dive into a fascinating historical puzzle. It's a story about a king's faith versus the very survival of his kingdom. This is the ultimate royal gamble.
So I want you to imagine something. You're a medieval king. You have it all, the power, the wealth, the crown. Why on earth would you risk every last bit of it on a brutal, dangerous military campaign thousands of miles from home, where, let's be honest, death was pretty much a certainty? That was the big question for every monarch who even thought about going on a crusade. For a medieval king, a crusade was the ultimate test of, piety and power. But the cost was just staggering. Forget about glorious battles for a second. The real fight was just surviving the journey. It was a gamble that put the entire kingdom on the line. I mean, just leaving your kingdom was a huge risk. It exposed you to rivals, to threats from within. But to go on a crusade? That was basically betting the house against famine, disease, and death itself. You weren't just betting your own life. You were rolling the dice with the future of your entire dynasty. It was a gamble on a truly epic scale.
So just how bad was it really? Well, the reality of these campaigns was a far, far cry from the chivalric romances and storybooks. It was a grueling, miserable, and often horrifying physical ordeal. And look, we know this because of raw, personal accounts. This isn't some historian's summary hundreds of years later. These are the words of someone who was actually there. The chronicler Fulcher of Chartres, he paints this bleak, bleak picture of just constant suffering. Cold, wet, miserable. The environment itself was just as deadly as any enemy army.
And then there was the hunger. The desperation was almost unbelievable. During long sieges, like the one at Antioch, the army was pushed to the absolute edge of survival. We're talking about boiling the hides of horses just for something to eat, or picking undigested grains out of animal manure. Starvation wasn't just a risk, it was a constant companion.
On top of all that, their understanding of medicine made the whole journey even more terrifying. They believed your health depended on this delicate balance of four humors. So traveling to a hot, foreign climate was thought to throw your entire body into total chaos, making you sick. They also feared something called miasma, or bad air, from swamps and decaying bodies, which they believed spread disease. In their minds, the very air of the Holy Land was basically toxic.
So, with the king facing such incredible danger, how did his kingdom even survive his absence? Well, the answer wasn't on the battlefield. It was back home, built right into the structure of the monarchy itself. They had a very specific and incredibly rigid political safety net. That answer was a system called primogeniture. The concept is actually really simple. The firstborn son gets everything. The title, the lands, the crown, it all passes down to one person. No debates, no arguments, no splitting the inheritance.
Now, the crucial result of this system was stability. By making the line of succession crystal clear, it removed all the ambiguity that so often leads to conflict. In fact, modern research into authoritarian regimes shows this very system made them way more durable. If everyone knows exactly who's next in line, there's a whole lot less incentive for a rival to try and seize power. It dramatically lowers the risk of chaos if the king suddenly dies. Of course, it wasn't a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. You had agnatic primogeniture, or Salic law, which completely excluded women. Then there was male preference primogeniture, common in a place like England, which allowed a daughter to inherit, but only if she didn't have any brothers. And today, most European monarchies use absolute primogeniture, where the oldest child gets the crown, period. You have to love this quote. Churchill, who was a younger son himself, just brilliantly captures the spirit of the system with his classic wit. It wasn't just some dry legal rule, it was a cultural force that shaped family dynamics and even, as Churchill cheekily points out, maybe even good looks. Okay, so we've got these two major forces at play. You have the extreme physical dangers of the crusade, and then you have the rigid political rules of succession. So what happens when those two things collide?
This gets right to the heart of the matter. A king's personal health was a matter of national security. A simple fever could spark a full-blown succession crisis. A battle wound could create a dangerous political vacuum. An outbreak of pestilence could invite a foreign invasion. The king's physical body and the political body of the kingdom were basically one and the same.
And listen, this was not just a theoretical threat. Look at this timeline for Richard the Lionheart. He was repeatedly knocked out of commission by illness.
He suffered from this mysterious sickness they called Arnadia, which was likely a nasty combination of scurvy and exhaustion, and it left him so weak he had to be carried around on a litter. His final decision to make a truce was driven directly by his failing health. For his entire army, the king's sickness meant constant, terrifying uncertainty.
Because the moment word got out that the king was gravely ill or even dead, the knives would come out back home. Ambitious relatives or powerful nobles could make their move. Without a clear and respected line of succession, the entire political structure could just collapse into civil war. So this brings us to the big conclusion. How did these kingdoms possibly manage this incredible risk? How could they send their leaders into mortal danger and not simply fall apart? Well, primogeniture was, for all intents and purposes, the kingdom's insurance policy. The risk was the crusade itself. The peril was the king's death. But the safety net of a clear, legally established heir meant that the institution of the monarchy could survive the death of the man. The transfer of power was automatic. It provided continuity and, most importantly, stability. And here is the most fascinating paradox in all of this. These rigid, seemingly archaic rules actually made the individual king expendable. By making succession a matter of law, not personality, the system itself guaranteed order. The king could gamble his life on a crusade because his kingdom had an ace up its sleeve, a political structure that was designed to outlive him. It's a really powerful lesson in how societies manage catastrophic risk, and it leaves us with one last question to chew on. We often focus on the bold actions of leaders, but what if the real story lies in the hidden systems that are designed to survive them? What are the political safety nets of our own time? That's something to think about.